Trump just did something that hasn't happened in the Federal Reserve history, in the US history, and that is he has subpoenaed the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. This happened just last night, and Jerome Powell came out with a big response that really shocked the macro and the crypto and markets equities world. So if you are holding Bitcoin or any crypto, or in fact any assets in general, you need to pay attention, because this not only tells us what the short-term rate cuts might be, whether the next FOMC will be bullish or bearish, but also it clearly shows Trump's plan in the midterm year and how this is potentially really good in the short term for assets that are anti-debasement, such as Bitcoin, to make a big bounce. So that's what we will get into today. We'll cover what this means for rate cuts, Bitcoin's next path to 100K, and I'll also cover a little bit about altcoins and why, when I can expect them to finally move. Okay, so let's get into it. And very quickly, I want to give you a brief summary of the news that came out last night. So Trump's team has officially subpoenaed Jerome Powell, and the investigation is centered around their renovation project. So apparently they have a budget of $2.5 billion to renovate the Federal Reserve headquarters. And this is actually not news. In the past year, whenever Trump has visited Powell, they have had this weird back and forth discussion whenever they're in the renovated new parts of the Fed building, and Trump, gives Powell these weird looks. Hey, look, you guys are spending so much money making this a big palace, etc., etc. So this has always been expected, that they would take this angle to attack the Fed, but now it's actually official. And the really shocking thing here is that Trump has used the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to actually try to indict Jerome Powell. Now, this is unlikely to play out for a few reasons. Number one, this has never been done before. Number two, Powell is going to retire anyways in May. So why do this now? Why not just wait 4 months? I'll give you my interpretation on the reason in a bit. And Powell also made a response directly on the Federal Reserve's website and all their social media. This is rare. This is unseen before. So on their website, they usually only post statements about monetary policy, rate cuts, things of that nature. But this time around, it's actually a statement made by a Fed Chair Jerome Powell himself. So he basically clarified a few things. Number one, they're going to fight this. Powell himself is going to fight this. He's not going to cower just because they plan to investigate him. And number two, which is pretty obvious, is that this is not the reason for this is not because of renovation. It's clearly because Trump wants rates to be lowered faster. They want the Fed to do his bidding and boost the economy and boost the markets. Even though they are already doing so very slowly, they want it to be happening faster. However, there is a deeper level, which is that from now until Powell's end of term in May, there's only 4 months to go. And I believe only 3 more Fed meetings, January, March, April. So the most they could do in this period is cut rates 3 more times. So why do this now? Why be so aggressive against the Fed and try to do this? And to me, it's actually pretty obvious. So this is all related to the midterm elections this year. Let me bring this back up. So what does Trump really stand for? Trump is a populist, okay? So how do populists win votes? It's by boosting the economy and boosting the stock market. And especially in booming years in the stock market, like right now, where stocks are surging, gold is surging, they really need help in the market sector in order to win the midterm elections. And exactly how the midterm election works is also very important here. So, background on the midterm elections. It's unlike the presidential elections that decides who is the president. The midterm elections, I just looked into today because I'm not American, I could care less usually. But the midterm election years are in the middle of the presidential terms. This is where the House and the Senate, I believe all of the House's seats and half of the Senate seats are up for grabs, are being re-voted on. So this doesn't decide, this will not change whether Trump stays in office or not for the next 2 years. What it does change is how many seats in the House and in the Senate are Republican or Democrats. And usually in midterm elections, the current party that the president is in loses seats because the presidents during their election years always overpromise and then underdeliver. This is just how politics work. And usually the first 2 years in, they underdeliver, and thus more and more seats get taken by the other party. And exactly how many seats the Republicans will lose will heavily impact how much policy that the current acting president can carry out for the rest of his term over the next 2 years. Now, this midterm election is specifically important for Trump because this not only impacts his policymaking for the next 2 years, but it also directly influences investigation into himself. So if the House is majority controlled by the Democrats after the midterm elections this year, then all bets are off. Not only will Trump not have most of his policies come in, but also he will be under discussion. He will be under investigation, and the prosecutors will look into him. Versus if the Republicans stay in control, then the congressional scrutiny will be controlled. And he at least will stay in power. He's not going to get in big trouble. So this is why it's a big priority for him. This is obviously his last term as the president. He is too old at this point, too much controversy. So it really is a lasting legacy for him in the next 2 years. And if they lose too many seats in the midterm elections, then basically he can't do much to save his legacy. So this is why it's very important to him. Now, the dynamics of the midterm elections is also significant because the midterm election date happens on the first Tuesday in November of the second year after the election. So usually it's in the first week of November. It's in November 2026, and the last time it was November 2022, and then November 2018, etc. every 4 years. So because it's a defensive election for the current acting party, the party that the president is part of and is making major policies in, and because they tend to lose seats almost always, it's not like that they're trying to make big promises and then win like the presidential election years, and then they try to implement those policies. Instead, they need to act earlier. They need to play defense and make sure whatever their promises are, whatever their main platform for their campaigns are, that they are the most solid during this midterm election year, way before the election date actually happens in November. That's why you see Trump already starting to act very aggressively. Okay, Trump has already ordered his representatives last week to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds. Trump continues to try to push the Fed to do aggressive rate cuts now instead of later on. And as he is unable to get Powell to fold to his commands, he is now trying to throw Powell under the bus and basically making Powell's exit either as he gets replaced early or he just naturally retires in May. Doesn't matter. He's trying to make this a big event 6 months before the election date of the midterms so that the markets can rally before that. He can get his rate cuts in place before. He can get the spending approved for his stimulus check coming from the TGA account, which is also controlled partly by the Fed. He can implement all these things from their populist platform to boost the markets, boost the economy months before November, before the midterm elections happen, because they're trying to play defense. And these seats in the House and in the Senate are already being heavily campaigned on and voted on as early as March. Don't quote me on this. I'm not a political expert in the US at all. This is just what I have researched on. So this explains why this year's midterm elections, the policy shifts happen way before the election date, unlike in 2024. So how does this apply to Bitcoin then? In 2024, in the election year, we know that right around the election time when Trump was confirmed, and he was clearly in the lead, and especially when he won the elections, market rallied, Bitcoin rallied, because he could actually, with some executive orders he signs when he gets into office, he took out Gary Gensler, he, what did he do? He helped push forward the Stablecoin Act and the Clarity Act. So all of these things get executed right after the election win. Whereas this year, these things that get implemented, like the rate cuts, like QE, which is happening right now, etc., that are boosts to the market, they need to happen in the months before the midterm elections. And that's why I think a bounce should happen on Bitcoin before, way before the elections happen in November. Likely sometime around Powell's inevitable exit in May, we should have this bounce already. And we have covered this scenario in our last live streams as well. Like, for example, back here, bounce incoming. So the specific level there is around the 50-week SMA right here, which is just about 101K. And you see we're not that far away from it. So from now until May, we should get a revisit to the 100K mark on Bitcoin. I think this is very, very likely. Really, even if you are a Bitcoin bear and you think we are in a bear market, extended bear market, when you look at previous Bitcoin cycles, right around these periods, as we get below the 50-week SMA and we consolidate for a while, especially in these midterm election years, which usually the Bitcoin bear market years are in, we do get a bounce. So looking at right here, this is 2022 bear market. We close below the 50-week SMA, we consolidate for a while, and then we bounce. And then we get a very strong rejection leading into some very bad catalysts with Luna and FTX. And you see, by the time of the midterm election in November 2022, this actually marked the bottom of Bitcoin. This right here was the week of the FTX collapse. Very interesting. I don't know if the two can be related together, but we definitely saw this bounce. Very clear here. And then the last time before that was 2018. So 2018 bear market. Back then, people were still looking at the 20-week SMA on Bitcoin as well. And you see, we had multiple bounces, not only to the 20-week SMA, but even to the 50-week SMA after we broke down below it. And we still made a strong bounce here, and then got rejected again, and then shortly after the midterm elections, marked the Bitcoin bottom. Okay, and then the previous time, we only have 3 data points here. So the time before that was 2014. Again, very similar. Bear market year, Bitcoin breaks down below the 20-week SMA, bounces to touch the 20-week SMA, breaks down below it, makes some more bounces to touch the 20-week SMA, and then after the midterm elections, the market, Bitcoin prices bottomed. So that's why for this year, you have to really be careful about this like election craze year. And when people say, oh, this is midterm election year, so we're going to have the Trump election year repeat in November. That's unlikely. What we have seen 3 times before is that Trump and the Republican Party will need to keep the markets up and at least make a rebound earlier in the year so that they can defend their current seats in the House and in the Senate as much as possible. So that's why they're doing all of this, forcing Powell to act, throwing Powell under the bus, making Powell's exit a big event so that we could get some sort of bounce, not only on Bitcoin, of course, but Bitcoin is just a very small portion of that, but on stock market, on gold, on silver, on all kinds of markets, so that they can stay strong until the midterm elections. But then after that, markets tend to not rally immediately after. They tend to bottom. So that's what you got to be careful about. But on crypto side, on Bitcoin specifically, we are even seeing the 20-week and the 50-week start to converge right here. In fact, right this week, they are basically touching right now. So this is what we got to watch. The 20-week and the 50-week should both get retested in this period of the next 4 months from now until May. This is pretty clear to me. Regardless of whether we get 1 rate cut, no rate cut, or not, I hardly think that matters. Because here's the thing. So we have 3 more FOMC meetings, January, March, and April, before Powell leaves office. And the market is always forward-looking. Okay, so what the market wants to see is that there is no uncertainty. So at the moment, after Trump started to force Powell, and Powell had to make this response saying that they will act according to the data and they will not cut rates aggressively just because Trump threatens him. Look at what happens to the probabilities. So 95% chance of no rate cuts as predicted by most analysts for the January 28th FOMC meeting, and then by March, 72% still of probability that there will be no cut. And before Powell leaves office, 59% chance that we will not have a cut, 34% chance that we have 1 cut, and then 5.8% chance we have 2 cuts. Now, you might say, hey, wow, like this is going to be bad. If we don't have rate cuts, markets can pump. Is that true? I will argue otherwise. Because two things. Number one, rate cuts really are forward looking. What people want to see is, are we expecting more rate cuts and they actually come? Or are we not expecting rate cuts and they don't come? As long as that's clear, it doesn't matter that much. Number two is because we have such high probabilities of 95% chance with this news that dropped last night, and people are really trying to form a consensus here that we don't have a rate cut in January, what tends to happen after is that Powell or some other spokesperson at the Federal Reserve will come out from now until January 28th with something dovish to try to swing this probability to the other direction. Why does this happen? You might remember last year when everyone, including Powell himself, said that they want to cut rates very aggressively in the last 3 meetings of the year. And we saw these probabilities, 95% chance of a rate cut. But then 1 month in, just before, like 1 month before the last rate cut of the year, all of a sudden, the probabilities dropped from 90-something% to 70% because the Federal Reserve Chair, Powell, and then other few Fed senators came out and gave some hawkish signals, like they always do. And that influenced the rates that people were expecting to these 70% ranges. But then by the end of the year, they still cut. This is how the Fed tends to act. If the market is completely pricing in that we will have no cut, then they will pull in the opposite direction with their news before the meeting. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if from now until January 28th, the next 2 weeks, we get some bullish news, some dovish news coming either from Powell himself or from someone at the Fed and bringing down this probability. And when this happens, you will see some news headlines, and that's likely to be a boost to the market. So that goes to show you the market, when looking at rate cuts, all they care about is the probability, the forward-looking probability of it, not the actual action of it. Each time that the rate cut happens, nothing happens. So we have seen this happen every single time. So I don't think it matters really that much how many rate cuts we will have in the next 3 FOMC meetings. What matters much more is, in the short term, the Fed will want to pull in the other direction because they don't want a consensus, which is going to be bullish for the next 2 weeks. And in the midterm, from now until May, the election is what drives all of the decision making. So Trump will want to do whatever he can to boost the markets early, and especially make it a big example out of Powell's exit to make the market flourish and boost the economy and do all he can. When Powell exits, we should see some very dovish news. We should see money printing. We should see stimulus check from the tariff dividend. We should see rate cuts. And then market booms. Bitcoin likely will already have seen a bounce towards 100K. And by that point, then all of the positive news would have been released for this year. And then that's when you got to be careful. Because going into midterm elections in November, from May, June to November, that's really the risky period, as we have seen in the last 3 bear market years. The bounce leading into a bigger correction in 2022. Same thing here in the midterm election year. multiple bounces, but then midterm election finishes, the market drops. Here again, strong bounce leading into a rejection, and then midterm election happens, market drops. And then eventually it bottoms. So my takeaway here is that combining the fundamental news of the midterm elections, the fact that Powell will leave office in May no matter what, and Trump will pump markets, at least prop it up from now until then, and the fact that Bitcoin is holding pretty solid. Since we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks consecutive of holding this higher low above the previous higher low here, it's safe to say that this is a weekly uptrend that has been held, because Bitcoin, even on the biggest wick, dropped to 81K, not 74K. So higher highs and higher lows are still intact, even though this drop was so large that it broke below the 50-week SMA. So now the question is, we should expect a bounce from Bitcoin to confirm this higher low. And the resistance naturally is at the 50-week SMA, right around 100K, 101K. And the timeline for this to happen is before May. So sometime from here until about here. So it's likely to happen, it can either do this, or it can do this, it can do this, I don't know. Some kind of scenario like that. But then the big uncertainty comes. Is this going to be a repeat of previous bear market years where we get a rejection from the 50-week SMA going into the midterm elections in November 9th? I believe it's like November 5th-ish for this year, and make a bottom after the midterm elections? Or can we actually break above the 50-week SMA with this momentum and potentially test these all-time highs at 120K? That's the big uncertainty. So for me, positioning myself right now is like this. I'm long Bitcoin. I hold a lot of Bitcoin, and I continue to trade alts in the long direction because I know a bounce is coming from now until May for Bitcoin to reach 100K. Once that has been reached, it's anyone's guess. Bitcoin sees this big resistance here at the 50-week SMA. And it needs to show us that it's strong enough to break above it and test the previous all-time high. Altcoins also, they should bounce with Bitcoin, especially with global liquidity increasing. And you can watch my summary of all of that right here with charts in this video as well, where we looked at the global liquidity compared to total 3 market cap compared to Bitcoin market cap in a ratio, and how global liquidity, as fueled by the US Federal Reserve's QE, will continue to increase from now until April. This is the official announcement that they have made, that they will increase their balance sheet from now until April. So that should act as a boost for altcoins as well. So from now until April, May, Bitcoin should bounce. And as long as Bitcoin bounces, altcoins will bounce. So there's no reason to be bearish on Bitcoin or altcoins right now. But once we get there, let's say Bitcoin is at 100K at the 50-week SMA and altcoins have bounced, then all bets are uncertain because we don't know if the market has enough momentum to carry Bitcoin towards previous all-time high and above 50-week SMA. And if Bitcoin forms something like this, I'm gonna remove all of these drawings. These ones here. So we don't know. The next scenario is if Bitcoin does this and gets rejected, breaks down below, and that would likely also take out these lows because these two are so close, and that could lead to a lower low, potentially as the 200-week SMA catches up, and that's when we have the bear market low around the time, if not after, the midterm elections finish. This is the scenario that has played out in 3 bear markets before. Or if this bounce is going to be strong enough to get above the 50-week SMA, maybe like this, and then it needs to retest the previous all-time high. And if it's able to take that out, then you can say, hey, look, all this time it's just been in an uptrend, high, low, higher low, higher high, higher low again, even though it's after a big drawdown, and then we make a new high. Which scenario is likely to happen? I don't know. It's anyone's guess at this point. The only thing I do know with pretty high probability that I'm willing to bet on is this move. And so that's all I'm playing right now. I hold Bitcoin, I trade alts from now until April, May for this move to happen, and then I wait and see. Pretty clear. Midterm 3 months outlook. The fundamentals make sense, the macro makes sense, the charts make sense on Bitcoin. QE is helping alts. All are aligned for this move to happen. And that's it. I don't think there's too much to read into this. There's a lot of long-term discussion people are putting behind this, saying that, hey, there's Fed independence that's being questioned, and if Trump succeeds in bringing Powell down before his term ends, then this will be a big war between the US government and the Federal Reserve. These guys have always been on the same page. They have always been on the same team. This is clearly a short-term forceful move that they need to do, whether that's for optics or to make a big theatrical event out of Powell's exit in order to get some more momentum into the short-term markets. But I don't think this changes anything long-term. And people are already saying, hey, because of this one-time news, it's going to impact the Dixie for the next couple years, and thus, Bitcoin super cycle. I don't know about that. All of this is driven by politics. And when you look at Trump's political goals, his populist platform, the last period that it needs to be held is this midterm election year when they're defending their House and Senate seats. That's it. So really, that's a short-term play. That's not a long-term paradigm shift like people are expecting. Okay, so play this bounce from now until April, May. Bitcoin to 100K, altcoins to follow with it. And then we see if we get a significant chunk of our portfolio in profit, we should take a defensive stance and try to cut some profits and just hold spot Bitcoin after that and see what happens. See if Bitcoin has enough oomph, enough strength to make a push above the 50-week SMA and towards all-time high or not. So that will actually show us in the price charts whether this is an extended bear market lasting the full 1 year into October, November of this year, or is it going to end early in summer, right after Powell leaves office? The charts will tell us. All right, thank you guys for joining the live stream. Hope you guys got some value out of this. Before I go, 2 things. Check out our portfolio trading bots, link in my bio. Currently, I am in a... I want to get into the privacy trade as well, so I'll cover that later this week. And also, I want to get into a lighter trade, as lighter is finally close to my entry levels. So I want to present that this week. 2 big narratives I want to trade for this week. And follow me on X at VirtualBacon0x for day-to-day alpha, especially for altcoins, as I don't really have time to make them into these live streams very quickly. So follow me on X if you want the quickest trade alpha. That's it. Thank you guys for joining, and I will see you on the next video and next live stream. Bye-bye.